camera, there's just you,
Right. Charles.
It's just 12 o'clock right now.
We're actually rolling. Sweet.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Charles.
Hi. Hey, Doug.
And we're gonna have to turn that off when we start because the crowd won't be able to hear online. So.
Well, I'll do it. Thank you, Mark.
Are you able to get the Zoom up on the screen for people?
Nice to see everybody. Wow, is that a swamp? It sure is. That's why. Huh?
Right, so Martin is not,
Martin is not going to be able to join us. Charles is right there.
so I will take him off of the roll call. Sorry, Martin.
I think Hannah was also a question mark.
Okay, and I
She
don't
had
see her.
some travel obligations or something, so she said she was gonna try to pop in if she could.
Okay, I'll take her off for now. And then Cassidy is our town person, right?
And I guess we can officially start. So, hello, everybody.
Hello.
June 26th, the IGA task force meeting is called to order. And we'll start with an official roll call from Julie.
Julie Jacobs, here. Charles Stevenson. Quietly saying here and holding up his hand.
On video.
Wendy Miller.
Here.
Sunny Smith. Mac Daddy Sunny Smith. Cindy Fisher. Here. Doug Matthews.
Here.
Dave Hammer.
Here.
Barney Driesdad. Did I say that right? Driesdad. I'll get it one of these days.
Here.
Andrew Bowen.
Here. Well, yeah.
Jan Weaver. And Cassidy Davenport. Is she officially like here in this meeting or is she watching?
She's just watching.
She's online.
Okay, but is she part of roll call or?
No, roll call is just for. the-
She's not part of us.
Yeah.
Not, you are part of us, Cassidy, but not part of us in this. Take Cassidy off. All right, then I think that's it.
Excellent, excellent. The next thing is to review and approve the agenda. Does anybody have any comments or questions on the agenda or recommendations? No,
Charles does maybe?
Charles?
Oh, no, he was just moving. Be very careful.
Just moving. No questions.
There are just a couple of updates and they're minor. I don't know that they matter. I forgot under the fifth item where we're gonna talk about the task force mission document. I forgot to also list that IGA defined document. So we'll add that to the agenda if that's okay with everybody. And then under the data review, sort of the document review, we got a whole tranche of data from Andrew earlier this morning. And so I just want to let you know what that is, and we'll have that for the next meeting. And then, so those are the only two material changes. The other thing, just from a timing standpoint, for Andrew, he has some other obligations. So if there's not objection, we'd like to move his two presentations up towards the top of the agenda and let him finish in case he has to bail out. So if those are okay, I entertain a
I'll
motion,
make a motion to approve.
Seconded.
and the agenda is approved.
Well, we have to actually vote. All in
Oh.
favor?
Sorry,
Aye.
Now,
sorry, I'm getting better. Trying.
by the end of this, we'll have it.
By
all
the end
figured
of this,
out.
we'll have it. Which is a perfect segue into, before we go direct to Andrew, just an opening comment. And it relates to how we did the roll call today. So I've been consoled or educated, likely in a correct way, that as the chair, I might not have been as formal as I should be for what people see in that board of trustees meeting or normal committee meeting. And I'll be the first to admit that while I've led more meetings than I can count, I've never led a committee meeting for the town or any civic organization. So bear with me while we work through that. And in the meantime, we'll lean on people that have, like Wendy and Jen, I know has some good protocol things. So if we miss something in protocol, please step up. And I think the more we work together, the smoother this will get. We even saw last week was way better than the first one. So hopefully we're moving in the right direction. To keep us sort of grounded, the board of trustees appointed the task force as a collaborative citizen group charged with looking at, understanding, and making recommendations for the 2024 IGA. This is a short-term task force group. We hope to wrap things up by the end of this month. We'll talk about that before the day's over, with hopefully a readout the first or second week of August, depending on availability of the trustees and the mayor. So I think keeping that in mind, I envision this as especially these next few weeks when we really get into the substance of a less formal decision-making body and a more active working group discussing, debating, looking at data. And so we'll try to keep it as formal as we can, but I think we just have to let it be a little bit organic as we go. So collectively, we should expect this group to operate more as a working group than a formal board committee. We'll look at, discuss, explore, debate where needed, the different ideas in order to reach where we're going. Is that good? Does anybody have any suggestions, recommendations, comments?
I think that's right on par.
Okay.
Which is big.
The way you summarize it.
Very good then. With that, I'd say let's move to the actual, oh, sorry.
We have not approved the meeting.
Yeah, see? That was a test. See if you guys
So
are
in the
thinking.
interest of your prior comment.
Thank you. Thank you. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Meeting minutes, not agenda, the meeting minutes from last meeting. In this fun, I move to approve the
I'll
meeting
second.
minutes. All in favor?
I.
You can move now, Charles, there you go. Perfect, thank you.
All right, very good. Now we can move on to the presentation. So one of the questions that came up a couple of times last week, and I think maybe in the week before that, was to gain an understanding of what the annexation process is all about and sort of not necessarily get into the weeds on it, but to at least understand from a big bucket what that is. And so we've asked Andrew and team to kind of go through that today. And then following on the heels of that is the short presentation on mixed use development. And it was mainly stirred by having seen what Andrew presented to the board. I thought it was really clear and effective, and I thought it might be helpful for us to have a condensed version of that. So those are the two presentations that we'll start today with. And with that, it's in your hands, sir.
Sure. Let me, Cassidy, are you on? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Do you want me to share my screen or for the presentation? Oh,
Try
okay.
if you want. That's fine too. Whatever works for you.
Yeah,
Actually,
you can.
share your screen, and that way you can move slides when.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be great. Let me stop sharing that.
Okay.
Oops, what's going on? Oh, goodness.
So those are your kids.
Those are my children. That is correct. But now I can't.
Can't get rid of them, okay?
That's the way it works for about 21 years. At least, yeah.
Hold on, I'm having. Why am I only seeing the people? Just a second, Cassidy. Sorry.
That's okay. I guess I'll just kind of start off by saying that this slideshow is meant to be kind of a reference stack for you all. There's a lot of information in the slideshow that I'm not going to go into specifics on. There are quite a few like 16-step or 19-step processes. So there are links in the slideshow, and pretty much all of this you can get to by just Googling the Lyons Municipal Code annexations. And it'll all link into pretty much all of this information that you can read through. But this will also get you there. Looks like you're there. Okay. And
Master screen.
Yeah, you'll just have to reshare your screen. There you go.
is that sharing the slideshow? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so this is kind of a reference for you all to come back to. And then this is kind of the most important slide. This is not an exciting presentation. It's rather dry, but I'll keep it as exciting as I can. So the steps in annexation, I kind of wanted to highlight 3 of the biggest or most important steps. So first, all applicants need to follow and complete the application procedures. And these are all, again, in the municipal code. Kind of going along at the same time is the annexation review process or review criteria. And then some annexations need to also be approved by voters, and I'll kind of go over briefly which ones those ones are. So just a little bit more about application procedures. So again, this is a 16-step process. You can see them all listed in the little guide on the side. But the submittal, and some of these go even further, I will say, such as the application submittal is 19 steps. And just the application submittal from the applicant would include things like a letter of intent, the statement of community need, the concept plan, description of consistency with the comprehensive plan, water rights, zoning, which needs to be requested simultaneously with the annexation, impact reports, and more. And those are all just submitted in that step 2 right there. But the application procedures, as you can see, it's kind of the back and forth between what happens with that application. To different commissions, the board. Yeah, and so that's just a little bit about how you apply to have an annexation. And then there are criteria on of that, and this is what people are going to be looking at to determine if the
And hey, Cassidy, you're bouncing in and out. I don't think it's on our end. If you can hear us.
can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can now.
Okay. Hopefully nothing got missed. That was too important.
Yeah, we didn't hear
we missed
anything
the
you
last-
just said.
Yeah.
We heard
Oh.
nothing. You went out completely. You're
Uh-oh.
going in and out constantly.
Well, I guess
You were right at the criteria discussion. Right
oh,
there.
just right here.
Yep.
Okay. So just kind of an overview. If you missed the application procedures, really step 2 is a 19-step process of submitting everything, including all the statements, water rights, zoning, and lots of letters of intent. So if you want to dig into that, that's in the municipal code. And then heading on to the review criteria. So along the way, the property needs to meet the review criteria. Otherwise, it's not going to make it all the way to the end of that previous process. So if it was a parcel just completely off, not attached to lines at all, it's not going to make it through that first process. So a little bit about the annexation criteria. There's a little bit in the comprehensive plan. I just included a screenshot here. The comprehensive plan kind of mentions things like annexations should maintain a compact footprint, and then a few other higher level items. And then it also, again, says municipal code requirements. So it needs to kind of line up with the comprehensive plan, but ultimately that chapter 15 is important as well. So I don't want to dive too deeply into the annexation review criteria, but I think, I'm not sure if it's the PCDC or you all have talked about the 1/6 perimeter rule. So there are a few things in here that are important for annexation criteria as well. And again, I don't want to go through every one, but you can see there are quite a few ways that properties need to align with Lions to be able to be annexed in the first place. And then finally, the annexation voting process. So this is, I think, would be the case for all of the properties you're looking at. But essentially the only properties exempt from a voting process would be any town-owned property, any property smaller than 5 acres, and any property smaller than 10 acres located in the Eastern Corridor. So I believe I've heard you all talk about that before. That is, all of those properties larger than that would go to a vote. Yeah, that's the end of my presentation. Again, I wanted to keep it brief and leave it as a reference point for everyone to go back to if they're super interested in anything. But if you have any questions, I'm sure hopefully I or Andrew can answer those.
Does anybody want to start with any questions they have about the process or drill into that a little bit?
I'm just kind of curious about the timeline. Like, this is a really comprehensive process. How long does this tend to take, or is that really just completely depend on?
The town once had a 90-day expedited
Wow.
review. But that being said, we have a current, even though it's been put on hold, was put on hold for 2 weeks, and now we're kicking it off again. About 2.5. I mean, we got a submittal, early last month, and it will take mid-August, late August to go through that process.
And that was my question too. Is that vote as a public vote, or is that vote between the committee or board?
The annexation process has, it's very public notification heavy. So you have 4 notifications within the newspaper, you post the property, you send out letters to adjacent property owners, and then there's a public hearing.
So is that the 90-day period, or does that sometimes linger longer?
Yeah, I'd say 3 months is a much more realistic, probably approach to the annexation process. And that's if everything goes without a hitch. Again, there's 19 submittal documents that need to be.
Oh my God, so what you're saying is so depending on who the developer is or how this could go, it could really, it's not really 90 days. It could really go out a much longer period of time.
Yeah, kind of the biggest part is kind of the heavy front load of the applicant. The more robust and complete their application packet can be, and the more comfortable the Board of Trustees can say that it's, in considerable compliance, then that kind of kicks off that process. But there are public hearings, and there's also a public hearing for the zoning establishment in front of the PCDC.
Right.
So there's multiple public touches for the annexation process. I just want one more note. If this is a residential development, then you have to go through the subdivision process, which also has public hearings. So from inception, annexation, subdivision to development plan, you have multiple public hearings.
So like an incoming new developer would have a headache, whereas someone who knows what they're doing would have all those P's and Q's already together, and they have the money together, they have the thing together, and they pretty much know what they're doing, and they know what to expect, and boom, they're already in place. So that's sometimes that
yeah,
okay.
that's the general, that you see it even for, one house, a set of house plans.
Okay.
If you've got a consultant that, been in the game for a long time, planners love that because you have a complete package. If it's a property
Well, that's
owner
what I
that's
mean.
submitting, and even if they have great intentions, there's a lot of back and forth
Right.
there often,
Right.
and you have to kind of carry them to the starting line and
Right.
across the finish line.
I have a question. Do you have any idea how much it costs a developer to annex property? Just ballpark.
I do not. Delore, I could get a number for how much elections cost,
Yeah.
which is considerable,
Mhm.
outside of the consulting.
Did I just
cost.
hear an estimate that they're generally around $9,000? Does that sound right? Or is that Or David,
I can't
Yeah.
verify that.
Ballot, I think it's like.
I haven't heard a number, they're required to put an escrow down on
Yeah.
5K
Mhm.
or something.
Escrow, oh my God, that's another,
Yeah, so the escrow is to, you know, to cover costs, staff time, if we have to bring on consultants or anything. like
so is there a big difference between someone who's doing something private as opposed to someone who's trying to do a business? Like, for example, you talk about tax, and a tax break or a tax as opposed to what a tax is, as far as to say, okay, I wanna be part of the city, or I wanna be part of what you're doing, but but my property is a certain size, or let's say, I wanna be part of the city, but I wanna put business in here, but this is business, is there a big difference there?
So across the board, for commercial development and if it's tagged for affordable housing, the Board of Trustees has the authority to allocate Macintosh water shares. So that cuts your utility connection costs down.
Okay.
If it's, you know, residential development, just a neighborhood, you know, market rate across the board, then you
And
do
if
not
it's
get
mixed
that
use,
break.
there's a bonus in there if there's a mixed use?
Not currently, but again, if it's commercial development, if it's economically, if it's for economic development, it's that the BOT does have the authority to allocate cheaper water shares.
Back up the tab.
Mhm.
So I want to make sure I understand. It is concurrent. The landowner starts asking to be annexed. At the same time, they're sending in the plan and asking for the zoning. And it's the landowner, but then what do they do? Like walk hand in hand with the developer if that's not gonna be the landowner?
I would think so. Do you
Yeah.
understand the question?
Yeah, so case in point right now, with Tebow annexation, we have an active application for annexation. There's a complete consultant team, but the owner is acting as the developer. It's important to note though, that not every time do you get hard development plans for an annexation. It might be like this case, you're just bringing property in with future plans to develop. So you're not always coming in with plans in hands. This is going to be, you know, a gas station with some houses behind it, you know.
So is that not a little risky for the town? Or I guess as long as you haven't given them zoning ahead of time, you still have some control?
I mean, they request zoning at time of annexation. So as soon as the property is annexed into the town, often the next action by the BOT will be establishing zoning on that lot. You have to establish zoning on that lot. You have to zone it once it comes into town, because then you would take a giant risk.
So it could be anything they put there? Once you've given them the zoning for a business, it could be anything.
Anything
So
anything that falls
I
within that zone
lived in
district.
Houston for a while, and they had no
No,
zoning. And you could
I
end
know.
up with a strip club next to the church,
Right.
next to your house in a
It's a
subdivision.
mansion.
It was a little bit risky, and it was a
Sure.
terrible place to live. So that's where the question comes from. I've watched it happen with no
Sure.
control, and it's not pretty.
Yeah, so again, they will request zoning, planning staff comments, and then that goes to the PCDC to ensure that the requested zoning falls in line with our comprehensive plan. So, you know, normally it's what zoning is surrounding, you know, that property that's being annexed. In the case of the Tebow annexation, it's CEC, Commercial Eastern Corridor in the front, which makes sense because it's going to be commercial. But then since there are plans perhaps in the future, nothing in concrete, to do dense residential development, they're requesting R3 zoning. So, but again, that's all subject to change. But
the zoning requested then defines what the permitted
That's
uses
correct.
of
Yeah.
that property are in the zoning code. So if you're not allowed to have a strip club there, it's not going on.
Yeah.
And if you read our code, you can't have a strip club right across the street here.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, that's what it sounded like, what you were saying, right?
Who's
And I
doing
mean,
it
I
now?
guess that sounds like I'm passing judgment on the strip club. I just had been a more protected environment, so when we landed in Houston, I was a little surprised that it was the weirdest mishmash of stuff I've ever seen.
It's the only large municipality in the US without zoning.
It's unique.
Hopefully it's because
And
they
that's
were
why it's
first and everybody
Houston School Board.
learned.
The first time I visited Houston, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I said it was a mansion here and a trailer park right there.
And that's what the
so
zone
weird.
tries to prevent.
Yeah, but
So-
there's a full list of codified permitted uses within each zone district.
To share, this is anecdotal, I understand, but to share, I just 2 days ago was talking to a townsperson, property owner that was pursuing, and this was some years ago, was pursuing a development on actually one of the parcels that are in question, and I'll leave it general so this person doesn't get upset, but they spent in the process leading up to it, going through what Andrew talked about. So there's a lot of preliminary plans, and this was going to be a commercial development. And he said that they spent close to $100,000 before they pulled the plug on the project, because you have some site studies and you have all the different studies and consultants. It's $10,000 here and $15,000 there. And so for a developer, they can gate it, but it can add up pretty quick. And that's why it's easier for a big developer like a Tebow that knows how to do it. But for an individual landowner to do it by himself or herself, they really have to rely so heavily on the town. And at the end of the day, the message that I think I'm hearing in this, and that I felt when I read the deck, is the annexation process is not something to take lightly for either the developer or the town. And if you think about something that's even remotely controversial, the amount of time that the town staff spend, that the board of trustees spend, that the PCDC spends in hearings and studies and reviewing documents is massive. And so that's, as we start to think about how that affects us as a task force, I think we have to think about if there's a property or if there's particular properties that we think are really don't make sense, we should recommend to the board that they look at those and say, don't put them in the IGA map unless you're really serious that these could potentially be annexed, because the amount of time and energy that can be spent is tremendous. And I think that was really illustrated by this presentation. So thank you.
So that kind of, I think, sort of answered my question, but it sounds like the monetary costs are, other than the time, obviously time is spent by the town and that is a resource, but the money is paid by the applicant or developer, or is there anything that the town pays for
So
other than all the
Just the election stuff.
Okay.
well, but the
And
property
staff.
owner is still on the hook to pay for the election.
Oh, okay.
And the escrow for large projects, that escrow is to pay for staff time. We actually have a spreadsheet.
So that
we
is,
log
so
our
they are
time.
actually compensating for some of the town
That's
time
correct.
in addition to, okay, so it does take time from the town, but it's not taking money and
That's
the
correct.
time is being compensated.
I mean, I'm sure there's some
Yeah,
leakage.
I'm
I don't
sure.
record all my time because I forget, but
But
in
that's the
general,
idea.
that's what it's
The idea
for.
is that the town shouldn't be bearing any of this, the
That's
developer
correct.
pays for the time for everyone to review things, and they're paying for all the studies. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, from annexation all the way to connecting to utilities. That
Okay.
is all the owner is put on, or the responsibility is the property owner or the developer.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Except,
Hey,
go ahead.
Doug, can I just wanted to add something. I don't know if you guys can hear me. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, just one other thought, because I think it's a good one, that there are all these stop gaps and kind of barriers to entry for developers that, protect and safeguard, the needs of the town. And to Doug's point, by saying, hey, this parcel here is probably never going to make it through this process, so we should just save everybody's time and save money, going down the road and not allow that into the IGA. I think that's a good point. But on the other side of it, from a developer's perspective, if we want a parcel that looks really great for affordable housing, the best way to keep housing affordable, coming from the perspective of someone in the commercial development space, is decreasing the costs and the barrier to entry for that entitlement process. So if we truly want to put affordable housing on a parcel that looks really well suited for that, by keeping that process as inexpensive and as on rails as possible, that's only going to then translate into lower cost of housing for the folks that are eventually going to live there, the buyers of the single family homes or the renters. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. So identifying a property as great for affordable housing and saying, hey, let's put this on rails so that it can be done really cheaply, or not cheaply, but in an efficient manner, will then allow it to remain more affordable, down the road.
And one last note, and this last thing I said about annexation, unless I get a question, is that 90-day time frame that was tried out, that was only if the applicant used the town's prescribed templates. So everything was predictable, everything was, plug and chug. You just put your information in there, and the town could predict the process. And I believe we only had one, even with that entitlement process.
Any other questions or comments, thoughts? Very good. And if you think of anything after the fact that we can consolidate them and get them to Andrew, I'm sure he'll address them. So that takes us to now a quick presentation on just the uses of mixed use development and.
Yep, and I'll have to do it off PDF because your added slides for some reason kicked it into a PDF. So no problem. Can everybody? Oh, I'm not sharing my screen. All right. So I just want to go over quickly. Again, I want to make it very clear that. Oh, yeah. I guess that doesn't do you any good, does it? There we go. Sorry.
Full screen button somewhere.
Well, there's not, because it's a PDF.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Drag on left of your screen and make that size smaller.
I don't see the little.
Go to the three bar thing.
This.
Yeah.
Aha. Thank you. See there? Teamwork makes the dream work. All right. So today we're just going to lightly go over mixed use development. And why this is important is because planning staff, town staff, and Boulder County staff all agree that the best place to develop is always infill and urban redevelopment. That's where we try to maintain our efforts, but as you all know, sometimes that doesn't work out and you have to have other parcels, and that's what this discussion is about. But in order to kind of go over kind of where the town is moving forward and planning staff drafting a code, I just wanted to give this brief conversation today. So it's important to note the Lions Thrive comprehensive plan, everything you see in red is for the future development is pitted to be mixed use development. You really have two areas for mixed use corridors. You have downtown, which is, and then there's some outlying kind of general mixed use. And then you have the eastern corridor, which also is proposed to be mixed use. And right now we're working on kind of two separate mixed use ordinances. One that will be for commercial corridor downtown and one for the eastern corridor, because, you know, mixed use districts, and we'll go into them in a second, they're really about form and kind of getting renewal in those areas. So high level, what is mixed use zoning? So if done correctly, a mixed use district really is a way to kind of reinvigorate a community. You know, in the past, and this is a planner word, but we had Euclidean zoning, which is when exactly opposite of Houston. So you have a use table, you have very dissected districts, and that's what the community cares about, is separation of districts, and is this use appropriate to be to be next to this use and this use. Mixed use zoning is different. So it's really focused on keeping a community's character, and that's done through what's called form-based zoning. So again, you care less about the use itself, but how it interacts with the community, how it interacts with sidewalk, or how it interacts with the aesthetic of the neighborhood. And so you encourage redevelopment in existing commercial areas by allowing greater flexibility. So mixed use districts really are, again, light on use, heavy on aesthetics, heavy on design criteria. And then they encourage a broad range of commercial uses to diversify the economy. So again, you're not so worried that you have an office in this area, an office here. You're trying to mix uses so you can really have an active building. And an important part of this, and it's somewhat of a progressive coding for mixed use right now, is having what's called horizontal zoning regulations. So for main streets where you don't want to have a realtor and an attorney, no offense, or, you know,
I don't like attorneys.
you know, but no, there's no problem with attorneys and realtors, but that does not need necessarily to be the use on the sidewalk in your downtown.
That's what we have, all we have downtown right now.
So this encourages and can give bonuses or through other mechanisms, those to be on upper floors. And then a restaurant or a shop downstairs.
Horizontal zoning is.
Horizontal zoning.
Okay, so not to throw a curve in here, but, and so you might not know this, but so something similar to a neighborhood like Prospect or South Walmart. So if we could have something similar to Prospect, like in East Lyons or Southeast Lyons, or maybe bring something like Prospect even to downtown Lyons.
What, yeah,
I'm not saying to bring that like that, but that would be kind of bring that colorfulness
yeah,
into what you call what you call that?
Horizontal zoning. It's a buzzword, but that's
I
what
like
it's
that,
called.
but I like the buzzword though.
You'll hear a few of them in this presentation.
Okay, okay.
Who knew zoning was fuzzy?
And then, it's exciting, I know.
very.
Um, And then the other big component of mixed use zoning is, in order to really revitalize a community, you really need people to live there, right? So it's really trying to get housing in above floors in your mixed use development. So that's really the whole point of this, is that we're trying to create space where people can live, and if they enjoy their main street, then visitors will enjoy their main street. If they spend money on their main street, then visitors will. If you don't see any of your locals on your main street, then you have a major problem, and they're going somewhere else. So again, focus on form, scale, and neighborhood aesthetics. That's the big point. And then again, staff in the PCDC are actively working on this right now, for both the here and commercial Eastern Corridor.
So the developer who bought the Eastern Corridor, what has been 5 years, I think, since, maybe even longer at this point, was 2017, I think. That's what his vision was to create a commercial mixed use development with housing above and affordable units, and it's a beautiful idea. Like, his vision is really nice. Hopefully it comes to fruition at some point.
Yeah, it just provides, and this is another buzzword, I guess, but little nodes of activity. You have little micro communities throughout your community, and it really helps to reinvigorate town. So I already went over form-based zoning, but again, as planning staff, we get an application. We don't really care what the proposed uses are. If it's a daycare with a strip club above it, maybe we provide some input. Worst case scenario, but that would probably never happen. But we're looking, yeah.
That might happen, actually.
Yeah, it's Colorado, but at any rate, for form-based zoning, again, you're really, especially for downtown, you're really looking at how does this proposal, how is it going to activate the pedestrian community around it? At Eastern Corridor, this is why it has to be different, because it has to be scaled more to a vehicular scale. So, your scale and massing of your building is going to be a bit different than what we expect for development downtown. And again, in speaking with developers, this is the type of development that that developers really are trying to latch onto, because with the residential spaces, they get those anchor tenants. And, you know, there is some built-in commerce within there.
And there's also an advantage when you also talking about the north side of the highway as opposed to the south side of the way, because you got people traveling west, people going away east.
Yeah.
So there's a strong advantage, also a strong advantage as far as where the people at that particular corner, for example, on that east side, people making a right or left there.
Sure.
You either gotta go across the street or because that whole zone might change because of that light. That whole thing might change.
Yeah.
Because people might not be able to go straight anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? The highway might decide, hey, we're gonna change that whole light.
Yeah.
We're gonna change that whole way, the way that thing changed.
Yeah.
I hate to say that, Barney, but everybody who's been here a long time, the highway might say, there's too much going on here. We might change this whole thing.
And
I must have like zoned out. What was form of building?
form-based zoning?
Form of building. The form of the building takes the precedence. Do you actually mean the shape, the style, the way it's
Yeah,
split up?
I mean, the shape,
Architecture?
how it interacts, how the facade looks.
Okay.
It truly is an
It is what
aesthetic.
it sounds like.
Yep.
Okay, the aesthetic. I just, it's like I
You can never
haven't seen,
depend on that.
well, I haven't seen a lot of emphasis on aesthetic so far,
Yeah,
so I
and
was
that's why we-
thrown off a little bit.
That's why we added some pictures
Yeah.
to the deck, because there's a
Okay.
couple of really great examples of
That
that.
whole thing's going to change.
So again, no magic bullets here, but what small communities and middle-sized communities are really seeing in their urban corridors is that mixed-use development really can help bring about economic development and housing development in tandem, and they can build off of each other. And this is another common this is a brand new buzzword. It's called gentle density. And I'll show you.
It's not feeling very gentle, but lands next to your house. Can you explain that?
Sure. So what gentle density is for kind of communities just like Lyons that have a lot of single family lots around your mixed use district. Again, what you're trying to do is trying to build capacity. So what gentle density is, and we're seeing it all over Colorado now, is that you have a home that's dilapidated, single family residence, and somebody, either a developer or that property, will scrape the lot, and then they build a duplex or a triplex there. It's modeled to look exactly the same as a single family residence. There are thousands of examples of triplexes that, besides if you were to walk around and count the doors, especially if it's in a grid system like Lyons, you would never truly know that there were three families living there.
That number 5 that you guys wanted to adopt the other night at that meeting, I guess you might not have been there. It was about density and not having to deal with setbacks anymore. You'd notice if they built right up on your property line with a 3-plex or a 6-plex, it would look different. Because that was one of the, was it that Monday?
I think you're talking about the subdivision.
Yeah, they were like, let's adopt these for easy breezy. And one
Oh,
was
the Prop
density,
123.
and it was like, let's just get rid of the setback. And that is gonna quickly change the nature of any neighborhood if you allow large buildings with no setback.
I think
It's
for-
gonna change it.
you're right. For the purposes,
It's not
not
gentle.
100%,
Not
Cindy, I
gentle.
totally get. I think for the purposes of what we're talking about, which is land outside of town, for the
He did
IGA,
say fill in.
he did, but that's and
Uh-huh.
it certainly is a different topic. It's definitely one we
Okay.
should put on our
As long as
other
it's
topics over
different.
there in our parking lot, because it's a very real
I mean, if you
topic.
set a big building right next to somebody's home property line, it's gonna be obvious.
Yeah, for the purposes of what we're looking at, think the Eastern Corridor properties that we looked at, and that's kind of why I wanted them to talk about it. You
Okay.
raise a totally, a related but different question
I was
for,
just surprised gentle
Yeah.
density, if you put a big
yeah,
building.
it's not very
next to
gentle.
someone.
I was just gonna say, I think a good example of this general density is 317 Evans.
Mhm.
Look what happened there.
Right?
Yep. No, that's exactly gentle density in a Lyons focus. So, but again, you know, the common, at least the goals of gentle density in mixed use districts is that where land is expensive, you put stuff there. And whether it's residential components mixed with other commercial uses, That's the point. And then the density supports neighborhood retail. Again, trying to keep things clustered.
Just,
Yeah, sure. So I worked for the town of Highlands, North Carolina, and we wrote a fairly progressive mixed use code for downtown. This was the best example of kind of micro mixed use, which I think is far more applicable to what could happen in Lyons. So we had a old dilapidated gas station. It was 2 blocks away from town, so it's a prime piece of real estate. Limited investment. They just never wanted to do anything. And then we opened that use structure up to allow pretty much any use. And we cared mostly about how it interacted. And this is a gas station. So this is a great example of what you can get with these mixed use codes. So what happened is the person that had this gas station up selling it to a developer that had some funds, and they took full advantage of use flexibility. And what the town got was a gas station, of course, maintained, which is important, but also a market, which had at that time, a lot like Lyons, we needed kind of, where do I get toilet paper? Where do I get this? And so it became that kind of general store corner market. We brought that back. But then also we needed housing, and we needed affordable housing. So apartment complex were developed on the top. And then also there was a need for office space and other things. So they developed office space off the back. So we pulled together residential, commercial, and office uses, and it was all off of one old dilapidated Marathon gas station. So that's the end game, and that's the goal here, is that you use these small parcels and you redevelop them to the max. And it's been the case in the past that often zoning regulations, with good intended, they prevent this from occurring. So it's trying to figure out how this can work in your community. And then Doug, you had offered a few other.
Does the state or county pitch in to help at all in some of these ways outside of the actual county infrastructure?
So in this case, the apartments actually, Highlands is a pretty bougie community if you've ever been there, but it's a pretty golf course heavy, and there's no places for their employees to live. So one of the large golf courses actually provides a stipend for those units for some of their employees to live. There's other, Prop 123, Boulder County Tax 1B. There's going to be a lot more creative funding that comes for affordable units, not just, market rate, But yeah, there's certainly, I think, going to be the ability for some capital stacking and partnership building in projects like this, which is exciting. This is a very low intensive community. Nobody was upset because the gas station looked like this. Now it looks like this.
Right.
And then, yeah, Doug, I'll let you talk about.
So this one was interesting, and I was very familiar with it. So I just wanted to put it in there so you could see what something can look like if you follow the design architecture of the city. This is from Old Town Bluffton. If you think of Bluffton, South Carolina, it's like one of the fastest growing cities in the country, I think. But this is a subset of it. It's an old town about the size of Lyons, probably a little smaller. They're landlocked because they have a big river that runs on one side, and all the other land outside of this old town area is already commercial or developed into residential. And they were having a real problem with how do we get more economic base and how do we add more housing? And they took a relatively small square of land and they built this following the same architecture of all the homes and the buildings in old, if you think of old South Carolina. And it is so cool. They have all levels of affordability in their housing, from extremely expensive to extremely affordable, lots of retail options, and sort of a park and walkways in the middle. And it doesn't feel like a downtown urban-y kind of feel. It's a very small town country feel, but they achieved exactly what Andrew was talking about. So I just wanted you to see that picture.
For that to work, you need to choose a design for your town and force it on all the builders. I mean, because we lived in Chester County, Pennsylvania, very historic. And I mean, they forced it on convenience stores, they forced it on gas stations. And then when you put something in there, it blended in. But if we don't pick an architecture, it's just gonna be, here's one, and here's one, and here's one. It's not gonna be cute or fancy, or it's just gonna look like a mess, and especially as it ages, because I think that's like the perfect thing. It's just like Chester County. And boy, did those gas stations and fast food places, they really squawked. But once they made them make a facade that fit in, it was great.
Everybody was happy.
Everybody enjoyed it.
And then the last slide.
She's right about that, because in reality, when you think of lines, we don't have a thing. We don't really have a thing.
The
We don't.
downtown's cool.
But
if you could
downtown's
pick that
cool,
theme.
but we don't look like Charleston, South Carolina. We don't look like Cary, North Carolina. We don't look like San Francisco townhomes, like San Francisco. We don't look like Greenwich Village, New York. So how do we
We need
identify
a theme.
ourselves? We don't look like, how
I
do we
picked
get?
the saloon.
Huh?
Yeah,
The saloon.
yeah, and I'll say,
Unless we look like Redstone, unless we identify ourselves as a.
So,
Okay.
and I think that's what Andrew was talking about
Right.
earlier. So don't get caught up in the design, but that's why I put it, just so you can see.
That's all we're
It's-
talking
Just make
about.
it
It's,
go
it's
well.
possible to follow a design.
Yeah, that's
This-
nice, it's
this-
nice, because like when you look at this second picture,
So, yeah, bear with me, Sonny,
right,
please.
okay.
Just in the interest of time. So that's why I specifically put the South Carolina. Martin identified these and sent these
Well,
links.
I'm looking at. I'm
And
looking at
these are just, again, he just wanted to show examples. Don't get caught up in the design, but these are all Colorado-based applications of mixed use. So that's, you can see how they followed their design for whatever their local area was. That's not to say that's our Alliance design, but they did exactly what Andrew was trying to talk about with, on the one on the right, open space that became both an access and sort of an outdoor park kind of community space. So that's, I think that's mostly what I wanted you to visualize.
Do you have that on the program, Andrew, to choose architectural style? Because, I mean, once it's started, it's sort of too late to.
yeah, so that'll be up to a public process in the PCDC, and that's a long process. But I will note, Lions is an eclectic community. So you run the big risk if you're too hard on aesthetics. I don't know if any of y'all have ever seen Helen, Georgia, but they picked Bavarian style architecture and they just blew it out of the water. So, you have to allow flexibility, you need developers to be able to work within parameters. And you're deciding the frame of the picture in basic outline. And then you're letting people be creative within that space. And that's what developers are looking for.
And we do have design standards
Yeah.
on the Eastern Corridor. Marty worked on it when he was a trustee and he got it adopted. So we do have design standards out there, but I agree, Andrew, one of the first paragraphs in the comprehensive plan says we want to remain a unique, quirky.
Does quirky mean you don't want to design and it'll just be whatever the builder just chooses to
Kind of.
do?
Yeah,
So it'll
that's
be-
kind of what the comp plan said.
Wow.
Not that you can't put, like he said, the framework saying we want 10% of your building to be sandstone.
Right.
To incorporate that throughout. We saw what happened when people proposed a 3-story hotel downtown and went ballistic. So I mean, but you have rights too. So what we can do is put height limits, setbacks, things like that, but we can't really control what a property owner. And that's not what this is for anyway, but I did want you to know there are design standards for the Eastern Corridor
Thank you very much.
and downtown. And
So,
downtown has-
In the interest, anything else, Andrew, that you want to add to that?
No, just and this is, for this conversation, it's important for the Eastern Corridor, that kind of those properties they looked at.
So for both of those topics, the annexation and mixed use, if you have extra questions or like Cindy, your additional topic, that would be a good one to put in our other topics for the BOT, because I think we'll have some recommendations that aren't specifically IGA related, and we should put them on the other one. So let's do that. Very good. Thank you, Linda. I appreciate it.
I've got to figure out the owl. Y'all keep working.
Okay,
So there aren't design standards in residential other than if you have an HOA. If you have an
HOA,
HOA,
yeah.
then you see they all look alike.
Right.
Or have a.
excellent. We good to move on? Anybody have anything before we move on?
That was super helpful.
Let's jump, good, thank you, I'm glad. Jumping back to the top of our agenda then. Or wherever I had it. I think the most important topic on there right now is feedback on the site visits. Maybe we should try to cover that first. Is everybody comfortable with that?
Sure.
Anybody want to kind of kick us off? If anybody has general, specific impressions? It seemed like it was a good thing for everybody to see that. Thumbs
Yeah,
up on
I'll
that?
jump in if
Okay.
no one else wants to. I mean, I think it was amazing to get to see everything. It really, it solidifies everything and it takes it out of the theoretical and you can actually see the property. So I'm just gonna kind of go through a list. I'm not gonna take a lot of time, but just feedback that I had. I mean, I think everything on the north end of town, the big questions, and I think everyone has these big questions: fire risk, egress for evacuation, utilities. So that's obviously the question that I would ask for Boone, Carpenter, and Connor. I think those are addressable issues. I don't think those mean we can't do it. I know that some people disagree with me, but that's why I wanted to we'll get to talk about what the fire department looks at and what the utilities look at. And that's why I wanted that, because those two questions are really obvious ones for all of those properties. I don't think anything that we looked at should be excluded, frankly. I think everything that we looked at has potential for annexation if it's done in a smart way. Obviously, people have a lot of concerns and personal issues with some of this, but I think that if we're keeping, if we're looking at Carpenter and we put fourplexes that are big, that look like the homes that are there, that is consistent. I think similar, all of the northern areas have big homes, so whatever's there should look like that. But I think we can do that as long as it's safe and feasible from a utility perspective. I'm not gonna go into my details on everything, although I could send this out if anyone cares.
Or just, you could, if you have it summarized, you can add it to the
Add it
minutes.
to the
If-
minutes.
if
Maybe I'll do
people-
that, 'cause it's
Is
not
everybody
long.
comfortable with that approach?
So that's it. There's a really broad strokes for the north end. Lucanen property has some great potential. I mean, I think everyone was kind of like, oh, it's a no-brainer, the 66-36 piece. But I do think we have to think about that as like sprawl, right? Do we really want to make a subdivision? I mean, when I thought about that question, do we really want to have a big sprawly area over there? That kind of is what that area looks like, right? We've got McConnell, we've got Stone Canyon. There's a little bit more of a subdivision-y feel. So maybe if that was there, that would be consistent with that. I also worry about, I don't want to put all of the affordable housing in the eastern corridor. I think that is a push for some people, and I think that we should have it sprinkled throughout town. It shouldn't just be the areas that are outside that no one has to look at. That's where we'll put the affordable housing and workplace housing, and we'll keep bigger things in the north area. That's just a personal concern I have, that we're leaving, the less desirable locations for the higher density and not thinking about creative ways to have some density in the northern areas. Highland Drive, okay, not the prettiest place in the world, but makes a lot of sense for density. Shady Lane, I have a lot of concerns about displacement of people, and I don't know what we would do. How would we make sure that the people who are there, who are already very marginalized and on the edge, I don't think we can just say, oh yeah, that one, let's just sweep it out, have someone clean it up and deal with it. That one, although it seems like sort of an obvious solution, I am really worried about cleanup and displacement of people, and how are those marginalized folks gonna have a place to live? And Nolan, I mean, I think that's another nice one. I think the eastern corridor ones all have a lot of opportunity for more density and mixed use, and I think that's the more obvious solution, but I don't want to give up on Boone, Carpenter, and Connor, because I think, especially Boone, having that park up there, having that lake up there, having an opportunity for like some really cool recreation, that was beautiful. That parcel blew my mind. And I am skimming and I'm missing a lot of stuff, but I don't want to dominate the conversation. So I will add that to the minutes and people can take a look if they're interested.
Thank you, Julie.
If we could pause for 45 seconds so we can switch over, and because I have to leave and I'm controlling the owl, so we need to make sure that we have continuity here.
Hold on. Don't go.
Yeah, don't stay tuned.
Charles, hang in there.
Feels disconnected.
I'm still here. I just, no video.
It looks like the owl is still.
Oh, we're good. We're still plugged in here, so.
Oh, yes.
You can keep talking, you just can't see.
Yeah, so anybody else have comments they want to cover? Wendy, did you have something?
I mean, I didn't go to all of them, obviously, I was only there for the north half. I mainly agree with Julie's comments, although.
Recording in progress.
Do you think we need to?
Mix it up.
Housing. But some commercial and also fire mitigation, roads, utilities, that sort of thing. I think that, where's some of my thoughts? I don't have any written down per se. I was gonna put them in a document for next time so we could really hash it out.
So, yeah, we certainly can, why don't you do that and then we'll,
Okay,
you
yeah,
can either put it in the minutes and or bring it next, when we get into starting to make our recommendations, it'd be good to have those notes. For you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll do that.
I'll be the
Cindy?
devil's advocate, I guess. In that 2014 document, Town of Lyons Housing Analysis, first of all, they said to replace, we needed 50 to 70 units, and we're up to at least 55 that I can count. So we're not as far off, at least according to back replacing the flood housing. In that same Town of Lyons analysis, they ruled out Boone, Carpenter, and there was something else up there because there is not water. So in my opinion, build a water tower that can service them and then bring it back in. And Connor, I took a trip up Long Peaks Drive, because that's what it has to connect to. And I hadn't been up there very often. There is another gully on that side, a deep one, that if the Connor one is a wildlife corridor, so is that. It's like, you're kidding. And they also, ruled that area out last time when I would say just Connor is in currently, or until, well, actually, I found this interesting because I went back and looked at the last IGA map, and all those properties were in rural preservation. And we're still operating under that map. And we're talking about putting high density housing on a property that last time we agreed was rural preservation. So I'm a little confused. It seems like we're jumping the boat. And I think that should just stay rural preservation, the Connor property. I know John Connor, he worked in our house 3 times. If he thought that was appropriate to put a bunch of housing on, he would have done it. Or if he'd been able to get permission. Instead, he put his dream house on it and was happy as a lark. It just physiographically, beyond the water, that piece of property, it seems crazy to work that hard and to sort of degrade in some ways the neighborhood. Long Peaks neighborhood is going to suddenly have a lot of people coming through on a narrow street they didn't have, and a lot more fire danger, and all those animals trying to get off Ridge Road, Peak, Mountain, whatever you want to call that. They come down there and they come down behind our house, and that's how they get to the stream, so they drink 3 times a day. I mean, if you're going to preserve a piece of property for those poor things to get something to drink in the summer, keep his.
And how many houses they want to live in, or what's the density?
It's a little under 5 acres and 6 to 12 houses, or 6 to 12 housing units per acre.
Housing units
Yeah.
Yes,
per acre.
yes.
So it could be more than one house.
Or it could be.
I mean, that one just seems like when you stand there at the top of Long Peak Drive in Tebow Park, it just seems like are you kidding? Have to build two massive bridges to even get to this thing, and it hasn't got a water tower that can service it.
I mean,
I don't get it.
we were up there and don't get me wrong, it is absolutely gorgeous, but you're talking about a wildlife easement and you're talking about a rural area that they want to keep nice. But like you said, to get up there and then for like
That bridge.
public access and fire public access or emergency access. Victoria, you were up there, right?
It's like a little island.
You could have done a lot. And would they have to redo that bridge where they built that house up
Well,
there?
you wouldn't be able to have,
It was
you
a
wouldn't be able to
one-way.
have 30 to 60 or 30 to 50 homes without a 2-lane bridge.
Yeah.
I have a
On
question,
both sides.
I have a question for you. What, would it be feasible to put a water tower up there? Would that be a place for
On
Connor, yeah,
it has never been proposed on Connor. It's been proposed at the top of the moon parcel up by that historic structure
okay.
that we saw. Height wise, no, the Connor has never ever been researched. You know, that family just came forward last year.
And I didn't mean to suggest a water tower on
Well,
Connor. I
mean,
just
that's
mean,
what
if they
I
have
was
a
thinking.
water pressure problem up there,
It's on both
You know,
sides.
yeah.
The water pressure.
then, the water tower seems like it should come first and make sure that can happen and there's money for it. And then let Boone and Carpenter and forget Connor, because it's like a little island with two bridges. Just forget that one. It's infinitely sellable the way it is for a lot of money to somebody living in Boulder County. But I just can't see how that island makes any sense for anything other than, barely what he did. And I agree totally about Lucanen. I agree totally about, like that stuff behind Tebow's property. And I had the same feeling you did about how do you improve it on Shady Lane and still, find but I think, was it you, who said that they had done this in Boulder somewhere and they made temporary housing for all the people while they made the better housing that they go back into.
They were able to get some FEMA housing from a disaster or something, temporary housing.
Just for the meantime, so
Yeah.
they got to go back to something
Because
nicer.
that federal funds.
Yeah.
Well, in 317, when they displaced them and scraped that, the developer paid for them to move to.
Live elsewhere for 4 months.
So that seems like, because I thought the same thing you thought, and then I think it was Victoria who said, or the mayor said, gee, there's ways to do this so that, yeah, you gotta do that for a while, but you get back into something a lot nicer.
And if there are undocumented folks in those houses, they're probably not gonna play along with the feds telling them to live somewhere else. So it's a much more marginalized population, probably than the folks on Evans, where Lee was so generous to say, I'll pay for you to live somewhere
Well,
else.
hopefully it
I
won't
worry
be
about
that.
that being a realistic
But
scenario.
his people also came back. They were so
Absolutely,
loyal.
and that
They
was,
all-
he was amazing, and that's probably not gonna happen with this
I
specific
don't think they're
population. And she-
necessarily undocumented.
Well, I'm just saying if
Yeah.
they are, oh no, I'm not making that assumption. I'm just saying we don't know who's back there and we would,
Yeah, I know two people that live there,
Yeah.
and they're not.
They have
Maybe it would work.
transitory visas to come work season.
I mean,
Colorado gives a lot of those.
might be worth a little inconvenience for a while to come back and live in something really.
100% that, and that maybe is something that we think about for that parcel that I don't know how much is gonna be required, but that it can't just be.
Right, you're out of here and we don't care about you.
Jen, did you have any other, no, I'm sorry, were you finished, Cindy? I'm sorry.
The only other one is that Hawkins one was also looked at in 2014. And at that time, the opinion was there were 2 acres that were developable. So there's something going on there that suddenly
He was
the
really.
same piece of, no, it was not on the won't sell. It was on 2 acres of it was considered developable.
Right,
On the lower side, not on the hillside.
There wasn't
Yeah,
enough
it was just,
for that point in time.
anyway, so the number changed of what they think is developable,
Cause most of it's on the hillside.
so.
It wasn't on the hillside, on where the house.
Are you saying you could support the 2 acres or do you think
Well,
both sides?
Yeah, I think, well, my problem with that is, it's a traffic issue. because from that gas station to our stoplight is not the safest part of road. And if you're gonna have 50 units and mixed use development, all those people have to get out. I mean, I'll have to be able to do it all year long. That means during concert times, that means during Saturdays and Sundays in the summer when it's really busy. And it can already be somewhat dangerous. So I don't know how they're getting in and out of there safely. That's really a lot of people, especially if you have businesses going in and out of there.
Any development, any of these parcels would require what they call a engineered traffic study.
Yep.
The developer pays for a study. And then they have to pay if there has to be a lane added or a stoplight added.
Well,
or
I
it's a right-
appreciate what you're saying, but I still have to skirt that gas station to get out of town. And I have learned that if you want to get past there safely, you go to the inside lane until you're past it, because at least there's one lane worth of somebody realizing they're about to slam into you
I'm just
before
saying
they
you
go across there.
Any of these would have to have a traffic study approving it before it could even move.
But then why didn't the gas station? That's what my point
Because it's a
is.
gas station and it's always been a gas station unless you change the.
But why
use.
didn't they have to do a traffic study? Because that thing is
Nothing
a
changed.
nightmare.
Nothing changed.
It's been a gas station for a long
time.
But didn't they have to do a traffic study when they made it a gas station?
Oh,
I mean, you're wanting me to trust that they'll do a traffic study, and I'm having trouble trusting.
But the,
Even when we moved into our house, there was no light there at McConnell, and I mean, it was like taking your life in your own hands. I mean, you wouldn't believe how many people run that light.
so to summarize what I'm hearing, the big concern, which I actually have on my list as well, is that egress in particular from that area would be tricky. Getting into it's not,
And if you
but
take
getting
them
out of it
all
would, so
through
that's.
our
that's a concern.
subdivision, then the houses along there in Fort Nick are gonna, I can even, I was like, had a nightmare. I woke up and they actually come out on the highway, but then they come up to our light and make a fast U-turn to get back to the light, because people do that. And it's not safe because they just go, and if you're trying to come down, it's already not safe.
Well, see, you brought that up, but you have to understand, you already have traffic because 3 days a week, there's traffic because of the weddings or at the farmette, which
Yeah,
is
it's a
right
busy
next
place.
door.
Yeah.
So then when you add the extra residents you're talking about getting, you already got the farmette people who already parked there, because you got 100 cars that park there 3 night. Well, how many are extra cars? 100 cars when they do the farmette, when they do the weddings, you see those people, they're trying to get in and out of there.
It's congested.
So all duly noted. Jen, did you have anything? We have just a few more minutes and I'm gonna make sure we get Charles. before
I'm
we
gonna
move topics.
follow in Wendy's, Julie's. I have notes that I will type up.
Okay.
and all you.
Charles, do you? have-
Yeah, thanks, Doug. No, I tend to agree with what everybody's been saying. Obviously, I didn't make it to the second half of the tour, so I'm just gonna rely on your guys's kind of eyes on those properties. But in terms of, kind of Boone, Carpenter, Connor, I was generally in agreement. I think that, that section of Boone that is currently like set aside for potential development could be a good spot as long as traffic is considered. Carpenter seems like a no-brainer to me. It's gently sloping, it's a good square, et cetera. Connor, I am definitely concerned about the wildlife corridor and the view shed from Lyons. I think you're looking right up at the hillsides, and that's what makes Lyons really beautiful is you have mostly undeveloped hillsides, and it's not a lot of space to develop. So, I'll just echo what everybody else has generally been saying. I don't know if I was to pull one out, that would be one of the parcels. I think my overall comment though on the parcels isn't really like about the specific properties. It's more about the affordable designations and the density proposals, just because it's hard to make a recommendation that specific without understanding what the population needs are. And then also just the affordable definition, I think is still worthy of some more exploration and revisiting, because I think that having a definition based upon AMI might not be the best for the community. I think there's rent to income ratios that are more appropriate and utilized nationwide to look at affordable designation. So I'd love to weigh more in on that at some point. But yeah, those are my comments.
Very good. Thank you for that,
I
Charles.
do have one more comment.
Yeah,
Just
please.
Because we keep talking about history. So when the farmette got annexed, was there a big study about traffic or what we call your neighborhood up there? Same thing, right? I mean, we can't go back to the gas station. That was way long ago. But when you're talking about the farmette just got annexed. And your neighborhood, I remember when that one went in. Same kind of thing, right? There was a traffic study, somebody looked at it.
Well, and people did have trouble there and it took a long time to get a light in. It would be better if they set it up from the beginning instead of waiting.
It's a
until people
Colorado
get hurt.
state
It's a
highway,
state highway.
so it's a little bit different about, we can't just pop in some traffic lights.
Well, that needs to be considered though, if you put a high density, high access area in off of it.
But I think we have to reel back again on this. We aren't saying anything, a specific use on these
Right.
parcels.
Right.
It could end up being bought by the farmette and used as parking. I mean,
Yeah.
this is just, is this property appropriate to be in Lyons primary?
To even
And-
consider ever.
It doesn't mean
Yeah.
it's gonna be housing, it doesn't mean it's gonna be commercial.
Yeah.
It's just, is it appropriate? Because I'll tell you,
We don't have any say.
Michael Whip would love to have the property.
Yeah. We're trying to buying it for
Or-
your.
Just for
Or
car,
more tiny homes
yeah,
or
honey
something.
homes, right?
And
Thank
is
you.
that a big deal to the neighborhood?
Boys for housing for
Right, thank you.
Depends
So-
on the
So we-
access.
And just to
We
keep,
just
Sorry,
can't
thank
stick
you.
on affordable housing and density. It's not necessarily. gonna
right,
work.
so in I'll do my last comments and then we'll switch topics as we have 15 minutes left and we've got about 40 minutes of stuff to
As usual.
cover. So I don't want to cut it short. It's good dialogue, but at least the wheels are turning, right? And that's what I was hoping we'd get out of that. The wheels are turning. And so as we move through our process and we get into talking about specific recommendations, all of this should come into our play. How do we want to direct the Board of Trustees to consider this, that, or the other thing, depending on what our comments are? I'll do the same thing. I'll submit mine with the minutes. I kind of did them in big buckets. I think I echoed a lot of what Julie started with, especially on the eastern corridor. And I thought the Laconin Stone Yard property was really interesting because it could be almost a blank slate. My number one concern is a broad stroke over these. It were, as Charles said, the inconsistency of the density numbers and are assigning particular portions of affordable housing, which may really limit what a particular developer could do on one property or another. And so those will be things that I think need to be considered. The challenge, back on Victoria's point, that like the Hawkins property could be used for a lot of things. Parking is right. Mike would love to have that property for expansion. So we may think when we make our recommendations to the board that property would be okay, but that's not landlock it by putting housing densities and limitations that somebody would look at and say, well, I can't do it because can only be annexed if it has whatever, 12 to 16 houses, which I think is how the draft IGA is worded right now.
No, I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't think it's saying that that's the only thing it can be used for.
That's the way the wording is. That's why we're gonna spend next week
That's
talking
why
about the
we're
document
talking about
itself.
density so much.
Yeah. It's the words
It's
matter.
the document.
It's in the document.
Right, but if somebody buys that property and they don't want to use it for housing, they don't necessarily need to use it for
Well,
housing.
then we shouldn't put it in
You
a legal,
shouldn't say it the way
we can't put it
does.
in the legal.
Yeah.
That's next week's topic, but we
Right,
shouldn't put it in a legal document
What it
if that's
says
not what we
is
want to
if it's
restrict.
housing.
right. If it's housing,
this
this
is
is
how
what
it
it has
is.
to be.
We'll get into the legal
Not-
document next week. Yeah, that's a good topic. Let's footnote that, but that's definitely what next week's topic is.
And why couldn't that be mixed?
You can't hamstring somebody purchasing a property by what they can do.
And yet
Exactly.
the
That's what we're gonna
document
look
is
at.
sort of
Next
vague.
week.
So,
I think that's exactly correct. Switching gears, again, just in the interest of time, because we want to cover, I don't want to go, you guys can tell us how we want to go through it. We had, agreed to just make sure we were all final on what the IGA task force mission is. I don't think anything, everybody was in agreement when we drafted it. It just now finally went in it. Do we, if we want to have a action or motion on
Sure,
that?
let's move to approve it.
Anybody want a second?
I'll second.
Okay, so the IGA task force mission notes, oh, sorry. I always forget that last date. That's right. See, we're getting- Sorry about that. Okay, so that's approved. The other one, and I'm open to how we deal with this. The other one was the one pager simplified. We had kind of slated to get people's edits on that today. How do you guys want to handle that? Do you want to actually sit here and do that, or do we want to can we just assign this to one person to take edits and then finalize it on our behalf?
I like that idea, because I didn't get to.
You didn't get to, okay,
But
fair
if
enough.
people, I mean, I'm happy to be, well. I'm gonna be out of town until the next meeting. I should not volunteer. I will not volunteer for that. Sorry, I'm volunteering.
I'm not either, sorry.
I'll be happy to do it if you guys are comfortable with me to do it. So I did actually get some really interesting and very constructive, just minor wordsmithing notes from Hannah.
Okay.
So we'll put those in, and it's actually amazing. You change one or two words and it clarifies a point a lot. So I'll work those into it, and if you want to send me, if you're comfortable with it, send me your other notes just directly to me, I guess.
Do you want a deadline so that you can actually have time to look at it before the next meeting, or?
If you could do it in the next, well, our next meeting is Monday.
I know.
So if you could get it to me in the next day or two would be really great, because I need to put it in the packet.
Okay.
Actually, I'm sorry, Charles, I'll be right with you.
Oh, yep, sure.
I think I need it by end of day tomorrow.
I
So
thought
I
we were
can-
meeting again Monday. What time are we meeting?
We are, but we have to post at 12:30 on.
We're meeting at 12:30.
If that still works for you, that was the thing we're waiting for the VA.
Yeah.
We'll get to the time in just a minute. I've got it in my file here, but if I start
Okay,
digging.
so revisions to you.
So
by the
send
end of
those
the
to
day tomorrow.
me by the end of the day tomorrow. I'll consolidate them. Somehow we'll get it either into the packet, so you'll get it that way, or we'll ask Andrew or somebody to send it out. So I.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a meeting appointment, but what I'm gonna do is, what they did, they gave me my leg on Monday. It's temporary, I have to go back down Monday again, but what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna ask them if I can make my time a little bit later, so I can make the money here on Monday. I'm just gonna make it later, so I can go down later. So I'll just put it on. I want to rush down.
So Monday, I will put down, Monday does start at 12:30, not 12 o'clock, because there's another meeting in here that runs right after 12:30. So 12:30 to 2 on Monday.
When I'll leave there, I'll leave there.
Charles, have something.
Charles, yes. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, just Doug, I sent a reply to that email that you initially sent with some feedback on it. So just, I don't know if you got that or not, but just,
I'm not sure if you don't mind resending it.
I'll resend it. Okay. Yep.
Okay, the other thing we've got, that we had in the packet, it was really just an opportunity to start dispersing some of the data that's come in. And so the things that are in there that were asked about last time, there's a lot of questions about what is the blue line and what is the municipal code associated with it. So that was in your packet. You can read it. It's pretty dry. The only question I have, and I was gonna ask Andrew, but maybe I can send that to Victoria, is we'd like to know, I'm curious when this was implemented, what date or, yeah, this ordinance.
Is that from the code?
Yeah, it's 13-1-130.
13 would be 2013.
2013. Okay, perfect. So look at that. If you have questions, we can ask them next time. On the one that's in the deck, there's also, I attached that blue line overlay to it, so you could kind of see what it was talking
I should
about.
clarify that 13 would have been when it was amended. Look at the very end of that chapter should say the original date. Is there a parentheses?
Adopted,
7.
Yeah.
2007.
oh, yes, 7-12.
So that's when the original was adopted, 20, whatever that top number is, when it was amended to include something else.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for that. Interesting, dry document, but a lot of people asked about it, so there we have it. Martin provided us the definition, I think this was from the very first meeting, of highest and best use. So take a look at that. I think there were a couple of people said, what does that mean? This is from the Appraisal Institute and their definition of what higher and best use is. And then there's a sort of a little description about how that's used. It's really in terms of what is the highest and best use for the owner or for a potential owner. It doesn't necessarily say the highest and best thing for Lions. So just understand that it's a financial measure about the properties as opposed to, is it the best thing for Lions? Okay. Also, you'll see in the packet was the density report that Andrew provided for us and my analysis of it. We did get a confirmation because it says preliminary. I did get a confirmation from Andrew today that that's really the right data to look at. He basically took a random of 10 or 12 houses within a variety of neighborhoods, almost like a cookie cutter thing, so that we had some comparative basis of what is the density in the various areas. And then we can compare that to the densities that are called out in the IGA.
And it's so nice that we have things so close by, because downtown Niwot has those little things like that, like if you look at downtown Niwot, and if you look at, like I said, Prospect, so we have kind of neighborhoods close by. I don't want to really say Boulder, because, but just those little things. But we have little blizzards that we can look at. And like I said, over the last 15 years around the United States, a lot of changes have been made with places around the country. So we have so many different examples to look at.
Right.
And Lions, we're through with. And it's perfect for us to make those changes now. Like I said, if we don't do it now, people always say, why didn't we do that 10 years ago? Why didn't we do that 20 years ago? And then, and that's what we look at. So Victoria, I'm glad you're here.
I have one quick comment about the density.
Yep.
Stuff.
Yep.
And I just wanted, and this is just to remind us all, I mean, at the end of here, at the end of the first page, you talk about what the comp plan references about preserving rural quality, avoiding sprawl, minimizing impacts. And I just want to remind folks that the comp plan is inconsistent and it actually conflicts with itself. So there are also goals in the comp plan that this is absolutely in compliance with, talking about what we use annexation for, specifically as an opportunity to expand Lion's supply of affordable housing and workforce housing. I mean, that's repeated as many times as the things that are pointed out here. So I just want to make sure it's not just cherry picking certain goals in the comp plan, but to really look at it all and to recognize that it conflicts with itself. And so, yes, your statement is correct in there. And it's also in concert with a lot of the different things in the comp plan. The comp plan is hard to reconcile.
Right. And the challenge we're gonna have is how do we help the Board of Trustees through our recommendations reconcile those?
Mhm.
How do they reconcile conflicting data? How do they reconcile inconsistent densities? What is appropriate? What is appropriate and what isn't appropriate? So anyway, that was just our education thing because we had asked for it. Andrew provided a whole nother tranche of stuff this morning that we've been kind of requesting over the last week and a half or so. Because it was so late, I couldn't get it in the packet, so we didn't distribute it. We'll put it in a usable format and we'll put it in the packet for Monday. So, and it's just to know what is coming, and then I'm gonna ask what other data we need. It's some details on the Connor concept plan that Victoria mentioned during the tour. Clarity on the housing density. I think he already gave those, but I'll add those to this document and put a V2 in it, and I'll footnote what you said, Julie, as well on there so that that's caught. He gave some clarity about the Locanon properties A, B, and C, of what detail we have and don't have, so we'll put that in there. We asked some questions about, are there any other sort of rough preliminary plans that might give us some inspiration of what's in thought? And there are not many. Other than the Tebow property, there is associated with the preliminary application data, so we'll get that and drop it in so you all have that. And then the big one that I think Charles might have mentioned, or somebody else did today, I apologize if I don't recall, was still looking for the criteria for affordable housing other than the financial metric. And it's proving to be very elusive data. The Boulder County doesn't seem to have anything. The town staff, by the way that Andrew looked at it, said the idea of choosing property based on the appropriateness of affordable attainable housing development is not part of the staff methodology in choosing new parcels for possible annexation. So it might be something that might end up being one of our recommendations to the board, that they consider, like, where's the right place to try to target affordable housing? Should it be walking distance to roadway? Should it be close to school? Should it be close to social services? So think
It
about
had
that.
been done in 2014, and walkability was a large part of it.
Right.
Doug,
Yeah.
so just clarifying something, were you looking for criteria that were other than financial? Because I think that there are financial criteria that can be effective for defining affordability. I was just saying something in addition to or as an alternative to AMI, because rent to income ratio is a really great financial metric that can be used to define affordability that floats with the market as opposed to just being anchored in AMI. So that's what I was recommending.
No, and that's the whole point, and that's where everybody goes, because everybody keeps coming back to AMI. I get AMI, and I get affordability is affordability, right? And that's to be figured out. I'm saying, what are the other things that you want to do? So if somebody's looking for affordable housing, they have other constraints in their life. So is there any filter that says it should be close to social services? It should be close to, well, if there are, I haven't been able to get them.
Oh, well, there are.
Right.
All sorts of studies on that.
Okay, well,
But
if you can help me with that.
we did it, those were not considered in the
Okay,
IGA.
I'll
because
resubmit
we were
the
looking
request.
at these as affordable.
Yeah, so I'll
Right.
resubmit the question again. So
Yeah.
thank you
And
very much.
Doug, just to clarify though, like rent to income ratio is another alternative to looking at setting rent levels that is separate from and different from average median income. Just want to clarify, like it can be a really effective broad tool that's being utilized by affordable housing operators all across the country really effectively and working. It's working in large metros, small cities, et cetera. So we should consider rent to income ratio as a measure in addition to the qualitative things that you guys are mentioning, which is really important.
So today I'm getting the sense of some of, I don't know if confusion is the right word, but like there's the words in the document which are pushing us to talk about affordable housing and density. And then there's the map. And I felt like the wording of the IGA is what pushed me to look at it that way. If it isn't really how the city's looking at it, that those parcels should have those kinds of densities on it, maybe what we need to discuss is the wording in the IGA and get that sorted out, because I think we're conflating these things and everybody's not doing it in the same way. I don't know, because I'm confused, but I'm starting to feel like that's where some of it comes from.
And so next week's agenda, which, by the way, we're 3 minutes over. I apologize. Are we good for just another 3 or 4 minutes?
I don't have anything scheduled.
I was gonna say, I didn't see you running out the
I am
door.
not freaking out.
Okay,
For me.
perfect. Well, let's try to do it quick, but so the intent, and this is a good segue to our last topic, which is setting the agenda. The intent, that's why I wanted us to look at maps first and the documents separate, because they're two very interlinked things. And so my intent was, or my suggestion to the group, pending your feedback, was that next week, we hopefully will have at least a brief conversation from the fire department about what they look at when they're considering a property for annexation or whatever. We hopefully will have a conversation with probably Aaron, I would hope, with regards to utilities, water, sewer, I think there are a variety of questions around utility and how that should be considered in our recommendations. And then I would like to spend the rest of the session after those two presentations on the document itself and what are the things we're struggling with? What are the things that we feel need to be addressed by the board? And that should help us start to put our arms around where do we need to make recommendations? What things do we want them to look at? Does that sound correct to you, all of you, or does anybody have any different approach to what next week should look like? Wendy, anything on your perspective?
No. No,
Charles, anything different for next week?
You can only do so much in an hour.
That's what.
right?
No.
I mean, I feel like that's pretty
Realistic.
I mean-
full.
So I'll publish that,
See how
whatever
far we get.
of this data from Andrew, we can create into a document. I'll just put it in our deck, even though it may or may not relate to the exact topic. And then let's just do a quick run through of where we are schedule wise. I'm trying to wrap this program up. So next week is Monday the first, again, 12:30, not 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock. July 9th. We don't have a formal agenda for that yet, but that's when we're hoping to have Mayor Rogan talk to us about some of her input about how this document came together, what it is, and sort of a question and answer session with her. And then probably start to craft, how do we want to phrase or how do we want to bucket our recommendations for the board? I'll bring my big post-it notes again. We might, sort of brainstorm how to lay that out. And then the next 2 weeks will really be filling in some of those gaps.
Is the 9th at 12 also?
Yeah, the 9th is from 12 to 1:30. The 16th, 12 to 1:30. We've slated the 23rd, but we did not set a time on that. And the question for the group is, do we want to try to have one of these meetings in the evening to have a listening session with the community in general about, and let them know what we're doing on the IGA, or how would you all like to see us proceed on that part of it?
I'm basically not gonna be able to participate past about the 17th
Okay.
of July. After that, I'm full-blown festival,
So
working
generally, you'll.
through mid-August.
Does anybody have a feeling about a community meeting session, or do we want to continue to do kind of our own personal outreach?
Well, I'm wondering about, because there seems like there are a lot of opportunities for the input in these meetings in the board of trustees throughout the.
After,
It
yes,
might make more sense for us
to
to
just stay focused.
keep our effort, like I do plan to do some outreach
Yeah.
to my neighbors, and I think maybe that's what this is more about, and then there's bigger opportunities for everyone to be invited, because man, we're never gonna do we're not gonna get anything done if we've invited, and it's not that we want to exclude the public, but
Right.
we want to recognize that there are other opportunities for public input, and that our very limited time here maybe isn't the best use of.
I completely agree, but it's open. Do you have a different opinion?
No, I agree.
Okay.
I feel like we need to start moving forward with the actual document sooner than later.
Yeah.
Like
next
next week
Just-
without,
I love the idea of
doing
getting the
more.
one pager finished, looking at the document,
Yeah.
and then we can start getting out over the next few
Good.
weeks, early July, and talking to people and getting something down.
Yes, sir. David?
I would just encourage everybody to reach out to geographic communities or others.
for sure.
Because I think so many people don't like coming to big public meetings and speaking. It's just.
Let's go to them,
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
So
I've already
reach out,
been
you'll get
doing
a whole
that.
different demographic.
100%.
yeah. And I've already been reaching out, especially the people outside of town limits. So the Apple Valley Road folks,
Yeah.
I've had quite a bit of outreach this week.
Yeah, I've been
Certainly.
waiting for the one pager because I want to.
Yeah, okay, so everybody's gonna take that on their own. I'd love that idea, and that gets us closer. Maybe we'll be ready sooner versus later.
So what's the next meeting after the 16th? I'm sorry, I don't,
The 23rd.
23rd, and then we didn't set a time.
No, but if you guys are okay, I'll try to set it for 12:30 to 1 again. I mean, 12 o'clock to 1, sorry,
1:30.
1:30.
Something
And
like
the
that.
same for the 30th as a placeholder.
I'll put that as tentative for now.
Yeah, and I'll send those in today, and as long as the room's available, we'll do that. Okay,
I have a question.
yes.
So, and something I don't think that exists that might have helped allay some of this pre-IGA task force. Is there a way to put a list of frequently asked questions about this stuff from our public on the web where they can all read and get the same information? One of the questions was, why are you just looking at those properties? Why aren't you, is it because the people died and now people want to sell and they want in? Why didn't we look at all the other yellow? I mean,
I honestly think the biggest issue with this whole thing is that people do not understand the annexation process.
Yeah.
There's no general, there's no understanding of how it works in the general population, so people that just think that it, that people can just come and bring a property into town and own whatever they want, do whatever they want with it, and the town's just gonna, help that's not really the way it works. It's a huge process.
From those two really angry meetings, the impression I had was people were very upset that they all looked like they were coming in under 5 acres, even though they were larger properties.
Yeah.
That seemed where people really
Right.
felt like they couldn't trust the zoning rules or what was behind that.
That
I
was,
think it lost trust with the public
That-
because of that.
that was, a
And
little
we
sticky.
need to gain it back, that they can trust zoning rules
Juanita,
and
you
they
wanna
can
touch?
trust the boards.
Do you want to touch on what just happened at the PCDC meeting this week related to that? The 5 acre rule, or David?
Well, we did talk about 5 acre rule, and the 10 acre rule.
You can watch the YouTube.
To clarify that, the PCDC had never recommended any get arounds for the 5 acre rule.
Do you want to talk about the edit, the thing, the proposal you just
Yeah, the
forwarded?
PCDC actually recommended language that indicated that it's the full size of the parcel that would dominate whether there's a vote or not. So in other words, if it's a 20 acre parcel and the town just wants to bring in 5 acres of the 20, still have to have a vote because the original size of the lot was 20 acres.
I think that's gonna calm things down a lot.
I think it
Yeah,
I
for sure.
really do. I think, cause I don't know if people didn't understand zoning. They just felt like there was something fishy going on and that scares people.
Right.
Also, I think now that you've seen the topography,
Mhm.
you can understand why on those maps, it wasn't, none of them, because some of them are more than 5. It's all of it. It's whatever portion of it felt developable. And that the retainage we wanted of, well, Boulder County and the town wanted, of the beautiful hillsides, So it really just, those two that I can think caused all the uproar were really just based on topography, and they came in at 5 acres.
But if they'd come in over 5 acres, I don't
But
think
we
you would have
wouldn't-
seen this
You wouldn't-
same
yeah, you wouldn't have seen
argument
that.
and
That's
fear.
unfortunate, because we would never want to cut into the hillside of a beautiful mountain. So I think people wanted a reason to think that not to trust, but it really was not a not trustworthy issue. It was purely what portion of this is even developed.
Well, sometimes it's just the appearance
Of course,
of a
of course, no, I
problem.
know.
That is the
That's
problem.
Yeah, the
Oh, we've
Texas
dealt with that
two-step
before.
memo helps the
Trust
situation.
me.
Yes.
Want to avoid that.
So there was a communication, and that this is part of what raised the angst, that there was a prior staff member and a communication directly to a developer
Right.
regarding the Boone property that helped explain to them that if they carved out less than 5 acres, it would be way easier to get through the process. And when people saw that memo, that's where the trust got eroded. And so that's part of why this recommendation is going from the PCDC to the board whenever that goes there.
Well, so I think it gets back to what Jen said, put an FAQ
Yeah.
together
Yeah.
with the facts that help educate people.
Yeah.
and one of
That would be
those,
number one.
one of those is, you can't get your property annexed without putting all that paperwork in. It doesn't happen behind the scenes
Right.
around you. It's your property.
I think.
And
yeah,
paying
leading to that
for it,
annexation
right? It's an
presentation,
expensive
15
process.
Steps and all that.
Several public hearings.
Right.
And
Yeah,
it's expensive, it costs money.
Takes 6
Yeah,
months.
people don't
it's
do it
very
like me.
expensive. Yep, go through a bunch of.
So we talked about data. Last question for the group. Is there any other data? Are there any other maps? Are there any other questions at this point that you feel would be helpful to you? Charles, that goes to you as well if you have any questions.
No, I mean, it's, that was, I was to thank Victoria again last week. She was a great tour guide. The way she explained things last week and the way she took us around on the tour and the way she was able to explain things, she was like a realtor. I mean, she was.
Yes.
You know, she pointed out things, she explained, and she gave us history, and she probably, because there were things I never knew about certain properties. And the way she got permission and went around and looked, pointed out things, she was great, she was fabulous. Thank you for your tour.
You're
You
welcome.
know,
It always helps.
because that topographical tour, I mean, put it this way, 5 years from now, we'll be able to have a whole Hoover helicopter ride tour guide to do, you know,
Yeah.
well, you know what I'm saying? It's like taking us on a helicopter tour ride to go around to see that thing. And then you can see the actual, you can say, this is where the property is, this is where property, this is where it is. And you can actually see it. And then you can go, oh, this is the Hawkins property. You can't put this on the hillside. You don't build this shit.
Victoria, sorry.
I shouldn't say that, but you know.
Which, part of the Lucan property is in floodplain?
The bottom.
Which,
It's-
is it
it's,
area
it's-
C or?
I think it's B.
It's the little one along
66.
66,
It's-
not 36.
Yeah, it's the small one right by the river. It's B,
The
I think.
ideal
on that.
cement plant next to.
Oh, that's right, you didn't go over there with it.
Next to.
C, okay, C, it's C.
Yeah, see, so-
We do have readers here, Wendy.
I know.
Hey Doug, I have to jump off, man. Yeah,
I need to
I'll
go.
see you guys later. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, John.
Can you give, I mean, we don't have to go there, but an explanation of, the only one we didn't go to with the like red lines and yellow was the Apple Valley one. And I've never gone out there and looked at it.
That's Stone Mountain Lodge.
Yeah,
When you,
That is, Stone Mountain Lodge is already a current lodge that's there. And then behind it is just like Planet Bluegrass. It's just a rock.
okay, so,
wall.
so what that's on there that would be redeveloped is if you went there, you'd be looking at the lodge and that would be what you're talking about?
Well, the Stone Mountain Lodge inquired at one point about
Okay.
annexation because like most commercial businesses, they want sewer and water.
So what they would be,
But-
what you're actually talking about, like building wise, was pretty much either just that lodge or the footprint-ish of the lodge.
We have never talked about buildings,
Okay,
anything to do with
All right.
annexation.
because that was the
Uh,
only one that looked like it had those red stripes on it.
No, the
that
red
Whittingham
stripe
talked
is
about.
It's a cliff.
Yeah,
It's topography.
It's a rock wall.
right.
one more, Jen?
So the Stone Mountain Lodge owners used to hang out in town a lot and they
Yeah.
always asked me to come to you to get it annexed so they could put in a swimming pool that the public could use and have a rec kind of center there.
But it is so far up.
I was just
Yeah,
saying,
it
there's
seems
no
like a long
flagpole,
way
is there?
away.
The only way to make
Take
it
them all with it.
contiguous is to go up Apple.
Is that why you guys always put Apple Valley on there, is so you can get to the lodge when they
No,
make this
because
map?
we do have a water line there already.
A water line.
Yeah, and so we are serving a majority of Apple Valley with water. Our water tank is at the top of Apple Valley, our current tank. And every year, there's 2 or 3 people who ask to annex. And so it's just, it's again, it's a snapshot of decades away. Is this potential for it to become Lions? They already think of themselves as Lions, they're just not.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
Any other questions? We really probably need to wrap up at this point unless there's, so do we need a recap of actions then?
Oh, and sending feedback to Doug by the end of day tomorrow on the one pager. There really aren't a lot of action items. Between people who wanted to submit minutes or notes.
Notes for their minutes.
Submit
Yep.
those to me.
And then I just want to add that I'll clarify and resubmit a request. Victoria for
I
that?
already sent it to you.
Oh, you did, okay.
Yeah, I sent you the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority's checklist of site selection criteria. You should-
Perfect. That's exactly what I've
And
been
you can
asking.
send it to the,
Yeah, we'll put it in the packet for next week.
I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but it.
Yeah.
If it's not, I'll let you know.
Should be,
But it sounds sort of right.
yeah,
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
second.
Woo. Oh, we have to vote. See?
Aye.
Really, would you have to knock it down?
I thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your input. Thanks for hanging in today. for the
Work.
rest of it.
All right.
Oh.
Thanks, God.
Thank you, Brian.